Fairy Queen, chapter 7 and 8. Chapter 7, Sunday. Mom goes to church almost every Sunday. I used to go to when she made me. But one of the best things, actually the only good thing when I think about it, about Dad's dumb hip was that I had no longer had to. Milking 14 times a week kind of got me out of there. Of course, since Dad slept in now and hovered about complaining about how much he hurt, church was kind of obvious activity for him. So he was stuck putting on his best shirt, which no longer fits because his guts gotten so big, and going his way into the car and riding off so the good Lord could mend his bones. His soul I'm not so sure of, not wanting to fight about it. Curtis had to go too. I, on the other hand, knowing there were 3 million jobs I should be doing, went back to bed, which is about the most satisfying thing I ever done in my entire life. Only instead of sleeping for 3 straight hours like I was hoping to. I woke up with a start only 20 minutes later when a blue Cherokee pulled into the yard. What the heck was Brian Nelson doing at our house on Sunday morning? Not that I cared, because finding out would involve talking to him. Besides, he didn't come to the kitchen door or anything, just kind of snuck into the barn. If he was coming to steal something, the joke's on him. Nothing to steal except cows, and he wouldn't put one of them in his Cherokee. But there was certainly a lot of stuff he could trash if he wanted to. Take our broken down stuff and break it further, or spray graffiti or something. Graffiti about Red Ben. So pretty angry about having to get up, and even angrier about Brian, I pulled on a pair of jeans and boots and headed out. Well, blow me down, as Grandpa Warren used to say, because there was Brian Nelson in the hayloft unloading the wagons, all by himself, with new clothes, I noticed, but still. Now, what was I supposed to do? I sure couldn't go back to bed. If nothing else, it would look pretty lame if he found out he was slaving away while DJ Swink was napping. I could work cleaning the barn, but that would be a little weird. Him in a hayloft while I scraped away below. The noise might freak him out or something. Besides, haying is hard work. You really need 2 people at least. So in the end, I angled my way into the loft and went to work emptying the second wagon. He looked surprised, embarrassed actually, but he didn't say anything, and neither did I. We worked in silence for a long time, long enough that we were, working together, that it was clear we were both doing the job. Hey, I said. Hey, I thought you all be at church. So that was it. He showed up when he figured we wouldn't be here. That explained why he'd been working so fast and everything, trying to finish up before we got home. Only I already was. We worked away for about 20 barrels without saying anything more. Jimmy told me I had to do this, he explained, lugging the barrel to the top of the stack, which of course explained why he showed up at all. Oh, we unloaded about 10 more. You saw him? I finally managed to ask. Yeah, he came by yesterday, talked to me for a while. Yesterday afternoon, I slid a bell up to him. Yeah. Did he, your big idea? Brian eyed me kind of sideways. It wasn't my idea. You mean you being my trainer and all? Saying this, Brian's mouth sort of twitched. Can you believe it? That guy is totally insane. I shook my head. Yeah, well, you should try having him as a coach, Brian wiped his face. Bill said he was real tough. Your brother said that? He looked pleased. We worked away for a long time. After a while, I went inside and grabbed a couple pops and came back to the barn and tossed one to Brian. He caught it one-handed and nodded thanks. Then it hit me. A day before, even an hour before, I would have paid money to watch Brian Nelson perish of thirst. And here I was giving him a pop. Isn't that weird? You should have seen their faces when Mom and Dad and Curtis came home. You couldn't blame them. Brian had made his feelings about us pretty well understood, and vice versa, and here we were 3 days later working together like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jimmy sent him over, I explained. Like that made it all clear, and Dad eyeballed the haystack, but I guess he thought better than to criticize it, and they went inside. Curtis kept looking back like he was worried about me. We were just finishing up the last bills when this nice feeling spread through the barn. This really nice hungry feeling, and it took me a while to figure out it wasn't a feeling but a smell. Dad was grilling, and all of a sudden I was so hungry I could barely stand up. Mom appeared at the barn door. Will you stay for lunch, Brian? Oh, geez. Please say no. Please, please, please say no. He shook his head. I just want to finish this up. Oh, come on. Just one burger. We love your company, Mom beamed at him. Brian must have been starving because he ate that burger in about 2 bites, which was a mistake because Dad had made some fancy Texas barbecue sauce that almost took the roof of my mouth off. Curtis coughed so much, Mom had to pound him on the back. Too much for you, huh? How do you like it here, Brian? Dad grinned. Oh, it's great, sir, Brian answered, not correcting him on a name thing. Get you another one? If there's enough, that would be great. God, he was playing Dad like a violin. But I can, put my own sauce on. Even I had to laugh at that. It wasn't that awful having him there. He and Dad talked about Jimmy Art, and Mom asked him about his family. And when she found out he was an only child, she said, Isn't it nice you have football then? In that really mom way she has, but it didn't seem to bother him. Mr. Swink, Brian asked, Why's your dog named Smut? Dad grinned. You ever seen corn smut, son? It's a, what's that word again, DJ? Fungus, I muttered, my mouth full. Yeah, that corn gets, turns the whole stack black and powdery. You named your dog after a fungus? DJ did. It was her idea. Brian glanced over at me, but I just stared at my plate, wishing I weren't blushing. Finally, so he wouldn't think I was a total idiot, I explained. Smut had this real soft black fur when she was a puppy, and it reminded me of corn smut. That's all. I hated talking about it, and I knew Brian would make a crack. But when I finally got up the courage to look at him, he was just smiling. Not smiling like I was an idiot, smiling like it was okay. That helped a bit. After lunch, Mom brought out the rest of Kathy Oates' banana cream pie. There wasn't too much left, and split 5 ways it wasn't much at all. But those 3 bites still made your mouth really happy. So we were sitting there on the porch feeling pretty good when Dad tossed the football to Brian. Let's see what kind of arms you got. Go on, you two, you catch for him. Well, that was about the last thing I wanted to do, especially with Brian Nelson, especially with the last bit of banana cream pie still in my mouth making me happy. But you can't argue with Dad. So we hauled ourselves up, Brian looking even less excited than me and Curtis, and spread out on the front lawn. You want anything particular? Brian asked Dad, fishing for time. For you to throw the ball, Dad said, so Mom shushed his language. So Brian started tossing those passes with that really pretty arm he has. I could tell Curtis was impressed, and he had to really sprint at first, they were so long. Where the heck you think your receivers are? Dad called from the porch. So Brian cooled it a little. Actually, he didn't have the world's best aim, but it was fun running after them. Sometimes Curtis and I would go for the same ball and run interference on each other, the way we used to when Win and Bill were around. I love catching footballs. It's not like basketball where once you get the ball, you have to immediately shoot a pass or something. But for football, all you have to do is run, which is pretty great, especially when you don't get tackled by your 230-pound brother, Bill, right afterward. So it ended up being a lot of fun. We had a good time. Smart chasing us like she was on the team too. Once I caught the football and tossed it back to Brian, his pitiful wobbly pass, as awful as a pass could be, and Curtis paused and looked at me with this really serious expression. And I knew that he was thinking that I was some kind of a gifted athlete, just the way Bill used to say it when the three of us would play together. And I took off after him like I used to chase Bill. And the way he ran showed me he really had been thinking it. And it hadn't been wrong, and eventually I caught him because he was giggling so much, and I got him down on the ground, even though he's half an inch taller now, but still skinny yet. And I started beating on him and tickling him while he shrank with laughter. Brian and Mom and Dad stared at us like we were crazy. They didn't know the joke, and of course they hadn't heard Curtis say anything, but they were laughing too, just because it looked so funny. After a while, Brian looked at his watch and said he had to go, but he said it in a way that meant he really had to go, that he just wasn't trying to weasel out. I'm sorry, I didn't even ask. Mom frowned. Your parents must be concerned. They don't care, Brian said flatly. I have to meet some friends. He tossed Curtis the ball. Thanks for the game. I walked him back to the Cherokee because I owed him that much at least. That was fun. He sounded kind of surprised. I wanted to say something about what it was like back when Win and Bill were around, but that was too painful. So instead I just said, yeah, it was fun. And then I guess maybe because I was still feeling good from our game. Or maybe just so clarify I added, you know, I really do know a lot about football. I know, Brian said. Jimmy said so. He said you'd be a real good trainer. My head came up. You want to do it? I couldn't believe it. No, I'm just saying, why do you? I stuffed my hands all scratched up from the scent from hand. Nah. Brian picked at his steering wheel. It's just, I need to get in shape. Jimmy said that with you beating up on me, I probably could. Is that how Jimmy said it? Well, yeah, you know, Jimmy. I thought about it. I wouldn't beat you up that much. Brian smiled at that. So you want to try it? Maybe for like a week, I consider. Because he was just teasing me. Okay, which totally shocked me. Okay then, I said back. He cleared his throat, but we don't have to, tell anyone, do we? Duh, and he left. Anyway, that's the story of how I became Brian Nelson's trainer, which is the reason you're reading this. Well, one of the reasons anyway. Chapter 8. People who are crazy and need to have their heads examined. If there was ever a TV show called People Who Are Crazy and Need to Have Their Heads Examined, I'd be the very first guest. They'd put me on one of those couches in a guy with a beard and a funny accent, which asked me questions, and the audience would ooh and ah as they realized this girl was crazy. What else would explain what I had just done? I've been thinking about it for months now, and I still don't have a good explanation. All I come back to whenever anyone asks me, including me, is that it sounded like fun. And though it took Jimmy Art to point this out, it was my idea. It's always a lot more fun to do something that's your idea. Plus, Brian actually agreed to it, which still amazes me. I guess he decided that training with me for a week was better than bench warming come September. I know these aren't very good reasons, but they're all I can come up with. Maybe a shrink could figure out more if I had millions of dollars to spend on shrinks. But I do know this. I don't have many ideas and not very many good ones, but this one got me excited. And I stayed excited for the whole rest of the afternoon. During milking, I thought about the lifts Wynn had used back when he was in high school quarterback, and how Brian could wait up the train and the barn while I worked. The free weights were still in the barn too, under a tarp. Mom wouldn't let Wynn and Bill keep them inside because their room is small enough as it is, and the two of them plus the weights would probably bring the house down. The weights were all dusty, but it's not like any football player ever said, oh, these are too dusty for me to train with. Thinking that gave me a grin. If Brian said anything, that's the crack I used on him. At dinner, Dad and Mom kept going on about how great Brian was, how hard he worked on a Sunday too, how much he liked Dad's cooking, how nice he was, and on and on and on, like he was a kid they should have had instead of us. If it had been one day earlier, I probably would have barfed out of the skies. I mean, you could tell Brian was being nice just to impress them, and he was only doing the unloading to get in good with Jimmy. And sure, he had an arm, but his arm stuck, and he didn't have any wind or anything. You could see he was falling apart just by the end of our pickup game. A couple times when Dad and Mom were laying it on extra thick, Curtis caught my eye and I grinned. But most of the time, because I was crazy, I sat there thinking about how I could build Brian's arm up and his whine and how his kissing of Dad probably was a pretty good idea since we'd be sneaking around behind his back for the week because there was no way on this earth I was going to tell Dad what we were doing. That night Amber called. Hey, what you do today? Nothing. On top of everything else, I'm a terrible liar. Liar. Amber laughed. Come on, tell me. Really, I milked the cows and took a nap, all of which was true at least. What else? Nothing, really. What did you do? Eventually, I got her talking about how much her job stinks, but I wasn't really listening. I hate keeping secrets, especially from Amber, who hates it too. Hates it when people keep secrets from her. But I sure didn't want her finding out about Brian any more than I wanted Dad to. And then all my enthusiasm faded away. What if Brian blew me off? What if he told his friends and they all made fun of me for thinking a dumb effing English farm girl could even be a football trainer? Because there's never been a teenage girl football trainer I've ever heard of. What if it turned out I couldn't do it? What if Brian did everything I said, which I didn't have too much faith in to begin with? But nothing happened, and Jimmy Art said sorry, but he made a mistake about me knowing football. And what if it turned out just the opposite, that I was pretty good and Brian stuck with it, and people found out who turned Harley's snotty, lazy quarterback into a real player? My folks would talk to me, probably, but Curtis wouldn't. Amber would pretty much kill me, and so would everyone else in Red Bend, just for that one game of nothing else. Let me tell you about that game, that one Harley Red Bend 2 game 2 years ago. Ben had trained all summer just to play Hartley. Every afternoon he'd go out to the heifer field and play his guts out, run until sweat poured off him like water, gasping Harley's name every time he started his next sprint. He wanted to beat Harley so bad. Wynn had been Harley his senior year, and now was Bill's senior year. Everyone said he was even better than Wynn had been, bigger and faster and more versatile. By the time the game started, Bill had worked himself up until he was in another place altogether. Bill was a linebacker, someone who works the fence behind the line of scrimmage, tackling runners, slowing down the receivers. But that game, Bill was everywhere. Every play he'd been elsewhere else up at the line or back or on either side of the field, depending on where he thought the ball was going, ready to run down anyone at all from Hartley who came near him. Every time the Harley quarterback reached for the snap, Bill would holler at the top of his lungs. We could stand it up on the stands. It gave me goosebumps. That's my ball. I'm going to get that ball. And a quarterback. First they started another guy and then Brian, who was brought in at the end even though he was only a sophomore because the two other quarterbacks were so beat. Would shiver a little, you could see it. And Harley's offensive lineman would get this little twitch and step away from Bill without even realizing it. And not on that play maybe, but within 3 or 4 plays, Bill would run them down, get the ball somehow, get possession for Red Bend. Then the Red Bend offense would screw it up. It wasn't like when Wynn was still playing when he was on the fence and Bill was on the fence and they balanced out. Instead, because the offense sucked so much, Harley would get possession again and back in would go Red Bend defense, meaning Bill. That's what the game was. The entire Harley team, 8 at a time, against my brother. Harley was ahead by 7 for most of the game, and then in the last 5 minutes, Bill intercepted a pass and ran for a touchdown, which would have been just fantastic except that the Red Bend kicker, I won't say his name because he suffered enough, missed the extra point and Harley won. And God, were they jerks about it, especially Brian. Every time he missed a pass or got tackled, you could hear him chewing out the other Hartley players, even though it was clear. Bill would have wrestled a bear to stop the play. After the game, when Bill was crying, he was so upset. Brian stood in a crowd of Hartley players and jeered at him, calling him a baby and a girl and every name you could think of. Remembering that game, well, you can't imagine. That didn't make me too pleased about Brian. He been fun this afternoon. That pickup game was okay, it really was. And he worked hard unloading the hay. Worked like he should have worked 3 days ago, but still. And he was pretty civil to me even. And that's what made me so confused. How could a guy who was such a jerk, how could he act so nice? I was also thinking that if Bill ever found out I was training Brian Nelson, I wouldn't make it on to a TV show about crazy people, because my brother would drive right up to Red Bend and kill me. You don't need to be speaking to someone to do that.